So
sorry to interrupt you. Perhaps if you could raise your microphone or the volume, it's a little low. If we hear clearly, it will be much better.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, it's better. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to say that it's been so exciting to see such enthusiasm and such passion from everyone on the panel and all of the guests. I would have loved to have been on any of those panels having those conversations. It was just thrilling to see and hear what everyone is saying about reimagining and reinventing education. And we are having similar conversations over here as well. So today what I wanted to share was a little bit about learning sciences research, and that's actually what brought us together with Edves. So with Edves is very passionate about learning sciences research and how important it is as a foundation to ensure that the whole learner is getting what they need rather than just the content. And it actually really aligns with what the former panel was just speaking about how you have the curriculum, but it's really about the how. It's, well, now that you know what to teach, how do you do it? And what are the best practices and so forth? And so what I'm going to share today is what learning sciences research shares with us about what those best practices would look like and how you can discover them. And at the end, I'll share a tool that's free and available for anyone to use anywhere that will help with that how piece, that implementation that you were just speaking so passionately about. So I'm going to share my screen here. Move my Zoom window. Okay. I'm assuming you can all see my screen. Okay.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Thank you. Okay, so let me go ahead and get started. So just so you have an overview of what we'll be doing today, I'm going to talk about 3 big ideas. The first one is going to be the value of learning sciences research. And then I'm going to break that into 3 big ideas. And then I'm going to stop and invite any questions you might have. So I can't see the chat, but just in case there are any comments or chats, I'm willing to stop, and I'm anxious for a conversation. So anyone who has any questions about anything, we'll stop for a moment. And just like Bill, I'm a fan of I don't know if this will show up, there we go, of a more beautiful question. So I encourage questions all the time. The second chunk that we'll have is we'll talk about the concept of learner variability and how it relates to learning sciences research. And again, invite your questions. And then the third chunk will be on designing learning experiences to support that learner variability. And some of it doesn't quite make sense yet, but I think it will as we move along. So that would be basically the structure, and we'll end on a tool where you'll be invited to explore something that's free, and it will help you identify what are some strategies that learning sciences research says or suggests might be helpful in certain situations. And I think you're going to see that it resonates across all of the conversations you've seen today, all of the phenomenal speakers and all of the panels. They all had so many things in common, and collaboration, the social support, the importance of culture, all of that was all highly embedded in the model that I will share. So let's start off with the value of learning sciences research. So first, learning sciences research really brings in different types of sciences all together. And the real focus is on 3 big concepts or big ideas within that of what it is. One is the importance of conceptual understanding. So really understanding the concepts. And some people were speaking about that on the panel. Another one is the importance of customizing and personalizing learning. And the third one is the importance of integrating the learning. And you'll see that the whole panel, everyone's been speaking about the same things, which is why it's been such a pleasure working with Edves, because they speak the same language, so to speak. Everyone is really very passionate about meeting the learners where they are and designing for individual learners, which is learning sciences research. So I'm going to go ahead and start talking about 3 different specific key aspects of learning sciences research, of what it provides for us. What are the benefits? So the first thing is that it informs. So learning sciences research, all that research of how learning takes place in all of the different learning environments, it will inform us when we're starting to plan. And it's not just research that's in the classroom. It's research that takes place where learning is in the museum or a library, learning is outside, learning is in after school opportunities. So learning everywhere. As we all know now, learning takes place everywhere, and having that opportunity to really understand ways to maximize that learning, including online, are all informed by learning sciences research. The second thing that learning sciences research does is, first, before I move on to that, actually, I wanted to share a photo because this really also is a great illustration of how important it is to also, when learning sciences research informs us of how learners learn best, and we think about the whole learner, one thing that's really important, especially when we're all going through an adverse experience like the COVID and the pandemic, and there's some element of trauma for everyone. And then in some areas, there are other trauma events that are going on. And so that's compounded over time. And one thing that learning science research has informed us is that by having with something that's really predictable and understandable and consistent is really supportive. So it lowers stress, it lowers the cognitive load, it helps the family. And when the family's less stressed, then it builds social supports. And that's where Edves really comes in handy, because of the fact that it's all in one, and it's built so in such a predictable environment and structure, it highly supports learning overall by everyone, including families. And that's clearly informed by learning sciences research. Another I for the learning sciences research is the insights. So when we look at all of this research that's taken place about how children learn, and really the focus is on how they learn. So it's that how piece, the implementation, what can we do to better help them make those connections for long-term memory, to make connections later and transfer it. It also provides insights. So what strategies work and which ones do not. And as the former panel was speaking about how one classroom has a different set of learners as another classroom, every learner is very unique, as we all know. The strategies will work differently as well. And so one strategy that will work with one group of learners may not work with another group of learners. And so what are the other strategies that one might try? And learning sciences research provides the insights for those types of questions that we might have. It also will specify different strategies on which you can build and connect to other strategies. So there are some times when a child's reading, or when a child's trying to learn math, there are specific strategies that will better support the needs of the whole learner, and some strategies that will just support the content space. And so when making decisions on planning time-wise, which strategy should I use in this space, it's more important to follow the insights of learning sciences research and try to find that strategy that will really support the whole learner. And in some cases, you can pile on different strategies within one lesson or within one learning experience, and it's even more impactful. And learning sciences research provides that information. The third benefit of learning sciences research is that it helps us identify the factors of learning that relate to other factors. So when we're learning, it's not just about the content, as we all know. It's also about the social environment. And I heard someone speak in one of the earlier panels about trust. It's about having that trusting environment and knowing that someone really cares, and having the support and knowing where to go for that support. And then it also has to do with the cognitive load and the working memory, and how much stress we have that's taken away from the capacity of that working memory. And all of these different factors will relate to how we learn, and they interplay in one way or another. And the big question is, well, how does one affect the other? And learning sciences research can help identify that. But don't worry, you don't have to do the deep dive into the learning sciences research yourself. I'm going to share with you a tool that's free, that's done all that work for you. And it will help you it will filter down and give you the ideas of the implementation of, well, how might I teach this in a way that will meet the needs of all of my learners? One thing that the tool will show you is that they are connected. So what I'm showing you right now it's called the factor connections. So when you consider a learner, this one is in particular is for literacy. So consider a student learning to read and write in secondary level, is where this one's coming from. And let's say that we look at all of the different factors that the learner has in them and that they bring to the learning experience. And one thing we know we all are bringing to every learning experience, including adults, every adult and every child to a varying degree, is that we're all going through this adverse experience of COVID and this pandemic. And so it will interplay with different factors that also are important to learning. And this is a diagram of just one example of what does interplay. So on this particular one, what I was looking at, and I'll show you how to find this yourself, what I was looking at was cognitive flexibility. So cognitive flexibility is one of the most important factors to try to help children continue to develop, and for us as teachers to support. And I was a teacher for many years, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that. So for us to really support is cognitive flexibility. And that's the ability to where when you hit an obstacle, you don't just stop. You figure out a way to go around it, and you understand that that's just part of the learning process. And the more they're able to do that, it also includes the ability to take on different perspectives. So if this is how I think and someone else thinks differently, that perspective taking is really important, because then that builds different ways of problem solving. And so cognitive flexibility is one of the most important factors in learning. And it helps children be able to solve a problem a different way in math. So if everyone's solving an algorithm or a math problem and everyone's solving it the same way, but you want them to learn how to think more expansively and be able to solve it in different ways, cognitive flexibility would be really important to try to build up with those learners. When focusing, if you look at this diagram, when focusing on cognitive flexibility, you can see the other ones are popping out. Those are the ones that learning sciences research has informed us and provides us with the insight that these factors are also related. And so if in the design of our learning experience or the lesson plan, if while we're planning, we purposely build in support and opportunities for children to show different ways of solving problems, we will also be supporting them emotionally. We will also be supporting their working memory. We will also be supporting in inhibition, the ability to hold back some type of behavior, thoughts, or actions. And so all of these different things are connected, but the ones that are popping out the darkest, those are highly connected. So what's really exciting is that if you see adverse experiences over on the side over here, you see that it's highly connected to cognitive flexibility, which was the one we really looked at. So if we build support for cognitive flexibility, we can mitigate and decrease the negative impact of the adverse experience or the trauma that might be related to the pandemic. And so when thinking about moving back into school and making plans, learning sciences research helps provide that insight into what should we be focusing on? What will be an impact on their learning aside from content? And what can we do to try to make sure that we're getting them well prepared for those pieces aside from the content? So those are three things that learning sciences research can help us with: to identify, inform, and provide insights. So now I open it up to you. If you have any questions on just the big idea of learning sciences research, or maybe the diagram that you saw previously, or just any thoughts that you'd like to share. And I know someone else is monitoring the chat because I'm not.
All right, Trisha. So currently there are no questions, but as soon as questions arise, I will forward them to you.
Fabulous. Okay, then let's move on. So now that we have an idea of learning sciences research and what it can provide and why it might matter, it does matter, let's move on to one of the big constructs of learning sciences research. And everyone today has already said this. This is just a different way of saying it. So everyone has been talking about the unique needs of the learner, how every learner is unique, and how we really need to be planning for the implementation because the learners are all so unique. And so the term that's often used in learning sciences research, and the term which Digital Promises uses in the learner model, which I'll share, is called learner variability. And so the reason why learner is first is because we always focus on the learner. So everything about education is learner first rather than content. So we teach children, and the content is what we teach them, but we teach children of all ages, and we teach, some of us teach adults as well. I also teach at the university level, but the learner comes first. Along with the learner, there is a lot of variability. And so the variability is just that there's no continuum, and it's not binary. You don't have working memory or not have working memory. You somewhere on a range, everyone has a varying degree of working memory, and it changes. It changes based on sleep. It changes based on experience. It changes based on stress and trauma. It changes based on so many different factors. And so when we consider, then we all can agree with the construct that every learner is different, yes, but within the differences, they also vary on so many different factors that when we're designing for learners, we have to remember that. And so it's based on three key principles. The first one, we all know, every learner is unique. The second one is that lessons designed for the average learner will actually not meet the needs of any learner. And so it's been tradition where I was in education. It was common to purchase a product, purchase a box of things for a classroom of learners. And that's a practice I never would do. And so people always questioned me why I wouldn't use the materials I was given. And I always said, because none of them meet the needs of any of my learners in my room. So when things are being designed for an average or to meet the masses, what ends up happening is there's so many studies out there that when you study, it actually didn't meet the needs of any of the children at all. And the reason why is because they vary on so many different factors. If this is interesting to you, this is the book that also aligns with the philosophy. It's a really easy read, The End of Average by Todd Rose. I don't have any benefit from mentioning the book. I don't know him, but it aligns well with the philosophy of learner variability, in that we can't keep planning instruction for the average child because every child varies. And this visual really helps bring that to life on how they might. So here are just two learners. And the jagged lines are how they are different. And each of the words might be factors, but you'll see that some are high. This girl on the right, she is higher on being able to recognize similarities, whereas she struggles a little bit more. But she's really strong with block design and symbol searching, and she struggles in number memory. So as you can see, these are all a series of continuums that everyone varies along. So you stretch and all these other factors interplay. So in some cases, if vocabulary is high and well known, then knowledge would be higher. And so they play upon each other and pull on each other to varying degrees in every single learner. And so anything that we would design for a whole group of learners would be unlikely to really meet their needs. Which is why one of the earlier panels was talking about the importance of using data, and the data that's collected in Edves, that you can use all of that data to really help personalize and customize that learning, which is really the basis of learning sciences research. So if we have that construct and we say, yes, oh, this totally makes sense. Now what? Well, within every learner, you can look at all of these different factors, and it's super overwhelming. And so Digital Promise has actually done a lot of that work on the back end. So they've done the research and they have synthesized the information and discovered that 4 main domains have emerged. And you can look at the whole learner in terms of basically a whole learner framework. And you can analyze the learners in this whole learner framework across 4 key domains. And that's what I'm going to share with you. So let me move. I don't know if that's blocking you, but it's blocking me. There we go. So the 4 key domains that all the variability of all learners would fall into are content, cognition, social emotional learning, and student background. So now that's going to take a few minutes to process what all of that really means, but I'm going to break it down in really easy terms. First of all, typically in traditional education, years ago, people were creating content. And so you would create your content, and then the content would be delivered to the children. But what we found through learning sciences research is that when you're creating content and then delivering it for children, we're forgetting about the children, because the children need more than just content to be successful. There are content factors, background knowledge and so forth, but there are other factors that are equally and in many cases more important to the success of a learner. And those fall into these three domains. Cognition, that's how the child thinks and processes information. Executive functioning skills often fit in that place. So organization would fit there, working memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, all of those cognitive pieces. There are factors in there that will increase or decrease the amount of content a child can learn depending on where the variability is. Another piece that the learner arrives with as a learner that's critical for learning, and everyone's talking about it right now, is social emotional learning. And that's where I heard through every conversation today. I've been on since the very first session, and where I live, that started at 2 a.m. So I have been learning with all of you, and what I saw was beautiful. There's a huge emphasis on social emotional learning naturally, culturally. Social emotional learning is the social support, the collaboration, the relationships matter. The classrooms thrive on relationship was a quote I wrote down from the previous panel. All of that honors and recognizes and expands on the fact that learners aren't just about the content they're trying to understand. The social emotional learning is very, very important. And it interplays with how they learn, as well as the cognition factors. And then we have the student background factors that also come into play. And there's variation across all of that. Student background factors would be what I also heard you say, how important it is to have the culture in the learning, how important it is to have the real life experiences, how important the relevance is. All of those fit into student background, as well as primary language. What language do they speak? What other languages do they speak? And some adverse experiences would be there as well. What other traumatic events have the children experienced that would then impede them from learning if we do not actually build support in a different ways? And that's the beauty of the learner model that I'm going to share with you, the free tool that actually helps you identify, if you know these things, what can you do? Because it all does come down to what the previous panels have all been saying and guests have said, is it does come down to, we have to consider the whole learner. And what's most important is to make sure that we're really supporting them in the ways that they need that support. So I'm going to stop and take a breath and let everyone just think about that for a moment. And again, invite any questions. And I'm good with wait time for a moment, just in case. Otherwise, I'll keep going. Okay. All right.
The question here.
Yes.
So this question says, concerning learner variability, if several and variable needs of every child has to be met, then how do we keep track of each child, especially in a school system where you have several learners in a class with a large size classes? I'm not back to small size class sizes. A public school with 50 kids in a school, what happens then to the kids? And in the latter part, the little longer, it says, I'm not back to small size classes, but I'm sure there's another. But this person is just asking, what happens to kids in public schools with 50 kids?
Yes.
Can you get the question?
Yes, I completely understand. So there are two answers to that. There's the dreamy answer, the idealist answer, which is that you would be able to create a learner profile for every learner. You would never try to look at every factor, but you would know enough about your learners first to know what to consider that when you're designing the lessons. So you would not, before worrying about what content you're delivering, you would get to know the learners. So once you get to know the learners first, and I heard many people talking about this earlier, talking about how they get to know, how do you get to know your learners? But that's primary and foremost. Once you know your learners, then you understand better which way to go about delivering a lesson or helping them understand the content or designing a learning experience. So the ideal situation is that you get to know each learner based on just conversation and based on having lots of open inquiry opportunities in the classroom where they get a chance to ask beautiful questions and you know what they're interested in and so forth. And then you give them lots of chance to talk. So typically there's less teacher talk and more children are talking, more questioning by the children. And that really also connects to what everyone has been talking about all day as well, is that really stimulating the curiosity and inviting the questions and helping them move forward. In the classes that have 50, and in middle school and high school, many of the teachers have 150 or 200 learners that they're doing, and that may not be as realistic. And so, but you still want to get to know your learners, but you wouldn't necessarily be able to customize learning experiences based on each and every one when you have 200. So what you can do then is I will walk you through the tool and I will show you how you could go about taking class by class. So a class of 50, if you know your learners first, which is always what we want to do, we know something about our learners just from conversation. What are they interested in? What are they passionate about? What types of questions do they ask? What makes them curious? And this particular class really loves science and digging in, and another class really loves math. And so when you get to know your learners, then you can go ahead and you can say, well, what other factors are common? What factors do we have in common? And then you can filter down to exactly what strategies would be most impactful. And I can walk you through that and what that would look like. That was an excellent question.
Can I take another question? Would you like to take another question?
Sure.
Okay, so this one says, can all these that you've talked about be implemented in an online learning environment where you have people from different backgrounds? So can this work in an online learning environment?
Yes, it can work in an online learning environment because it's based on how children learn. And so it's not tied to the context. It's tied to the learners. And so it is adaptable. With the digital tools, sometimes you have to be creative on exactly how that would translate. An example would be, you would do a gallery walk in a classroom. So a gallery walk in a classroom is a strategy to allow children to share, collaborate, give feedback, and then use feedback to improve. And so a gallery walk would have student work on display in some way. Everyone walks around and sees it, and there's a conversation. That translates very nicely to the digital form where everyone has it. They take their turns in their Zoom rooms or whatever online format is being used. If there's, I know Edves has a great discussion opportunity and they have video capabilities, so it can all be done in that way as well. So yes, they do translate. The context is not, it's about how they learn, not where they learn. Great question.
Thank you, Trisha. That's all for now. That's
okay.
All for now.
So what I will do is I will move on to the third chunk that I was going to share, and that is implementing this information. So now we know why learning sciences research is important, what kind of benefits it gives us. It gives us information, it helps to inform us, it helps give us some insight, and it will give us some other information we can apply. And now we know that learners vary, and we all already agree on that. Every learner varies. And now we know that they vary on different factors that can be organized into different domains. But what exactly is this and how is this going to help me? So now, because we all care so much about the how, anyone in education is, yes, I love the ideas. Tell me how to do it. So what I'm going to share with you is the tool that actually helps tell you how to do it. And that's when it comes to designing those learning experiences, whether it is for a class of 50 or a class of 5, whether it's in a classroom or online. What is it that we can do? So what I'm going to share with you right now is going to look overwhelming at first. And so it's really just meant as an invitation. It's an invitation to do some further exploration. We all talked about curiosity today. Many of us, I heard say that they were taking these other online courses just because they could on edX or whatever. I also am taking an online course right now just because I can. And so consider this your deep dive if you're interested at all. This is your next opportunity to do some discovery-based learning and play around with the tool and discover some different things. I'm going to give you the overall structure, and once you start looking at it, it will make some sense. So what you saw before were the 4 domains. So every learner has variation. This particular model is grades 7 through 12, roughly, and literacy. So if you're learning reading or writing at the upper secondary high school age, and at some point it actually extends to lower and upper, below and above those grades. But if we design just for content, we are not designing for the learner. We're designing the content. The content may or may not match the learner. And if you believe in learner variability, you realize that it actually won't match very many learners at all. So what we really want to look at are these factors. And so the whole learner model tells you that every learner has variation in what their background knowledge or what their knowledge is in the areas of literacy. But these are the specific factors in cognition. These, like executive functioning skills, these are the specific factors that will play into how they learn. And these are the specific factors related to social emotional learning, which again, I've heard is so important. And these are the factors that will play into student background learning. And if a child doesn't have enough sleep, then it will impact their working memory and it will impact other factors. And so you don't have to figure this out or read the research or do any of that because the tool actually does it for you. I just wanted you to have a broad overview before I jump into it so that you understand what I'm doing with it. Here's an example of what I will show you when we hop in and what you have the invitation to explore and discover on your own later. In that same learner model, I'll take the literacy 712 just as an example. If I say, well, what I know for sure about every learner in this room, it could be the class of 50 learners. Every single learner coming back to school or learning online right now is going through adverse experiences. Keeping in mind that when we're designing for learning experiences now and most likely next year, we're no longer designing for children. We're no longer designing for students. The reality is we're designing for families. So the more we can do to support the whole family structure, the more their social support will be strong, their stress level will be lower, and the child will learn better. And so we know the whole family, every family is going through some type of adverse experience, and the range will differ. And that is the COVID pandemic experience on top of any other experiences that might be going on. So if I look at just that one in this tool and I touch, if I hover over it, and I'll walk you through it, but I just want you to get the concept first, then all of these other ones pop up. And what that means is that tells me that when we are undergoing adverse experiences, and you can think of this in terms of yourself, this will work with you as well. Think of yourself here. You're going through adverse experience, whether it's having to work from home or whatever the range is. Because of that, your emotions, as well as the children and all of our learners, emotions will have some variation from what they normally would be. So some children may be quieter than they normally would be. Some children might have more explosive emotions as a result, but emotion will vary as a direct result of adverse experiences. Social awareness and relationship skills is very important. And we all see this. Any of you that have children know that our children are craving going back to school because they miss all of this. They miss their teacher. They miss being with their friends. This is so important. So whatever opportunities we have to build that in somehow, even during online learning, then we're better supporting the needs of the learners. Other things are really important, you'll see over here, but it also tells us, learning sciences research tells us that when undergoing adverse experiences, our children will have a harder time with working memory, which means that we need smaller chunks of learning. And someone addressed that earlier brilliantly in a panel. We must chunk the learning. We cannot have long spans of learning. It does affect their attention. And so working memory will be improved if we're chunking it better. That will also impact long-term memory. And so sometimes with adverse experiences, long-term memory is stilted and people wipe those ideas out and some of those things. So they need a lot of repetition, and there are tools you can use for that. And then we have cognitive flexibility. And if you think about the fact that when all of this happened, the day schools closed and everyone went home, that was the day, because we all experienced it, regardless of where we were. That was the day that required the most cognitive flexibility. We all got hit with an obstacle. We all had to figure out a way around it. And in many of our lives, there were multiple obstacles. It was compounded by all kinds of other things. And so the cognitive flexibility was absolutely vital. If we did not already have it, this caused extra stress. Helping our children develop that now is most important. And so this tool will help you identify, well, where should I put my emphasis when designing my learning experience? Oh, I need to really be aware of the fact that working memory and cognitive flexibility will be impaired when my children come back to school in whatever hybrid model it will be. So let me intentionally plan supports for that. And then we get to the next point of what exactly does that look like? And so now I'm going to hop out and I'm going to go in, and I invite you to just watch, or I invite you to join me. If you'd like to join, here is the website. LVP stands for Learner Variability Project .Digital Promise, that's the organization.org. And it's a nonprofit and our project is dedicated to helping support learners through planning for learner variability. So I'm going to exit this. There we go. And I am going to hop in on the internet to that website and show you exactly how to find it. And I'm going to walk you through just one example and then leave you with the invitation to do a deep dive and discover what else is in there and how it might provide insight when you're planning for learners. But this is the how piece. So when you go into lvp.digitalpromiseglobal.org, there you'll see a lot of narrative. You can read it if you're interested, or you can skip ahead straight to the part where it says models. Those are the different models we have. But in Explorers, since we're going about the discovery base and I give you a discovery challenge, go through the Explorer. And what we're trying to do is identify what are the learning needs of these learners. Now, if you're fortunate enough to only work with a small group of learners, especially for whatever reason, or if you want to do this for your own child, then you can go through here and you can do it on a student by student basis. But in most cases, you would be doing this for a small group instruction, or you would be planning it for the class size of 50, like you were mentioning. So what I did was I went into Learning Needs Explorer, and I believe this will be recorded, so you'll be able to watch it again later anyway. Let's go back into Literacy 7 through 12. Since we were talking about it, it's familiar. And then it's going to ask for your email address, just so that it can keep a record, not for us, not for anyone else, but for you, because you'll be invited to create a workspace. When you get in, you will see this is the most exciting part. So if you just explore this page, I think you'll be really excited. As a teacher, it's just so informative. It's also very useful for teacher groups when planning learning experiences. So if you're doing any type of professional learning community, professional learning network, where you're trying to plan or change or reinvent what you used to do in a typical classroom, you want to reinvent it in a different way, then this tool would be very helpful. So the way you would go about using it is, remember, we're using it as a filter. So right now, if I was considering 50 learners, the most important thing would be to think about my own students. Now, I am going to think about the 50 students that you might have right now, and it would apply to any students. You can see that if I hover over adverse experiences, like we were talking about, since we all have them in common, you see exactly what is interacting. But we can have more control than that. So let's go ahead and say, yes, I do believe that all of the learners, or most of them, are undergoing some type of adverse experience due to COVID. I also think motivation is really important. So you saw that motivation was not highly connected to adverse experiences. That doesn't matter. I know my kids and I know my students, it's the end of the year. They're not as motivated. They're at home. They miss their teacher. They miss their friends. So motivation might be an issue. So I'm going to go ahead and slide that and say, well, I want to plan my next learning experience. I want to plan whatever I plan next to really be more motivating, to really give them that extra motivation. So right now I'm planning for what I want to include for the whole learner. Notice I haven't touched content because the content honestly is irrelevant. Your content will be culturally based, very relevant and real life to your students. So you can look at it just through the lens of these three and meet the needs of the whole learner. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at adverse experiences. I'm going to look at motivation. I am going to look at, we know that these learners are online. We know next year they'll be online for some portion of the year. So self-regulation will be really important. The older they are, the more access they might have to other devices, which would distract them. They have other things they could be doing. They have siblings in the house they'd like to play with. They have responsibilities in the home they need to help with. So self-regulation of focusing, getting the tasks done, and so forth will be really important. So I want to make sure that I build in support in my lesson or my learning experience for self-regulation to be really, really strong. And I know, based on the fact that we're all going through a pandemic, that cognitive flexibility and working memory might be impaired. So I want to try to support that better, especially because we all would agree that having open minds and being flexible and adaptable to situations is an incredibly important life skill. And working memory, this is what it will take for anything to ever be retrieved later. It has to be in working memory, and then it will go to short-term and long-term memory. So working memory will be very important. So let's say that those are the things that I want to really consider most. If I hit next, it's going to go through all the research on all the strategies that learning sciences research says are important, and it will filter through them and tell me what I should be doing. So it will give me the how and the implementation based on learning sciences research for what my learners needed, which is what I picked right here: adverse experiences, motivation, self-regulation, cognitive flexibility, and working memory. And because I went through this rather than content, it's content agnostic. It can apply to any content. What this is showing me is there are other factors maybe I should consider because these are highly related. So let me take a look here. Well, if we want real learning to take place, long-term memory is important. So I might go ahead and say, yes, I agree with that. And if I know that emotional stability, or I have a few children that are emotionally fragile right now due to stress, I might choose that as well. So now I can pick next again. And now it will show me the strategies that I should build into my lessons. And this works for online planning and offline. This is where you can actually decide what should be synchronous, live, and what should be asynchronous. What should I make one of those awesome videos that someone was speaking of earlier? What should I put into the video? What's really important? And so now it's drilled down and it said, for every single factor I chose, these are the most impactful things I can do. If I give my learners a chance to do annotating, taking notes along the way, it will support working memory, it will build those social connections and so forth. If I provide checklists and rubrics to help them, then that will be supportive. If I give them a chance to talk about their writing, it will support them. Reminding them to take movement breaks and reminding me when I design my online instruction to keep it short. Those are all really important. These other ideas, these other strategies will also support the learners. And so you can do a deep dive of this later. I know we only have 2 more minutes, but I want to go ahead and stop there. But you can see building trusting relationships is here. So if that's really important, then you can click on that and it will give you more examples of how you would do that. There's a video for how it would look in a product, and a video for how it would look in a classroom, and then other ideas and resources. So it's an open invitation. These are the specific things that you would want to design. This is the how. How can I meet the needs of my learners that have these characteristics? And then if you embed some of these ideas, often, to be honest with you, often the ones that they land on are goal setting, help them learn how to set goals, goal monitoring, monitor their goals, reflection, reflect on their learning, and feedback from the teacher. That's authentic and soon and really personalized. If those are embedded in the learning, then learning sciences research says you'll be meeting the needs of learners across so many different factors and really supporting learner variability. So I leave you with that invitation to do a deep dive at your own will, to discover what else is available in there and see how you might be able to use it. I also, if I had gone further, you would have seen I could create a workspace where I would collect all of that so I don't have to remember it. And then I can have conversations as a team with a grade level or a group of teachers or with an administrator, and we could plan. You could plan synchronous versus asynchronous. You could plan for the whole learner, etc. I'll share the link to this so you can see those samples. And if you're interested in any other samples, you're welcome to reach out to me at any time. I'll share the slide deck link so you'll be able to find me, but here's my email. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very responsive and I'm very happy to explore or explain anything, to share learning with you and learn with you. So I thank you for your time. I hope that this was helpful. And if we have a moment, I would say I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Trisha. Thank you so much. So a question for you here. And you know, a lot of people on the live stream are saying hello to you from different parts of the world. Someone says hello from Nigeria. I can see so many people just saying we're following you and they're just so grateful that you made our time to be here. So this question says, it looks like the IVP software would require a one-on-one interaction with the pupils. How can we use it for virtual learning? So this person is of the opinion that it will require a one-on-one interaction with pupils. How can we use it for virtual learning?
Yes. No, it actually does not. And you can use it for virtual learning. You can use it to plan what you would do in virtual learning. And I have a workspace. I'll send a link that will share it. And I'm also, if anyone really is interested in that, I'm happy to hop on a Zoom at any time, even 2 a.m. So it works for your schedule, and show you how, walk through the thinking process of how you might do it. And then you can do it yourself.
Okay, thank you so much. Trisha, something else that I just realized is that from the comments on the live stream, I find that your session has opened the eyes of a lot of people to find that there's so much content on the internet. So someone says that all I need to do is just hop into the internet. I just need to find solutions on the internet. So thank you so much for this eye opener. It's been such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. If I could leave you with just one thought.
Yes,
it's interesting to hear. There's a lot of conversation that I hear on social media. I hear it among different educators around the world, talking about the learning loss and the deficit and the COVID slide and all of these different concerns about what learning children are losing. But to me, it's really very much a deficit mindset. And I challenge everyone to reframe that and look at what our learners are getting. Right now, our learners have increased agency. They're going out, they're finding things. They are like you, finding new things on the internet. They're discovering new things they might be interested in. They're learning how to collaborate in different ways. In many ways, they're able to help others right now, so that helpfulness might increase. They have a higher appreciation for school. They might be developing more compassion. They're definitely developing more curiosity and initiative. They might arrive back to school with more interest and more initiative and more of this excitement. And I promise you, they're gonna love their teachers even more. So teachers, keep going. You're doing a phenomenal job. You're